This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.
Welcome to America Daily. I'm your host, Vanessa Rios Gomez. Today's podcast is a Veterans Day special. I talk with Marine Corps veteran Michael Boscia, who's one of the coordinators for Irreverent Warriors. Irreverent Warriors say they are the men and women who have been prepared to kill and die for our country. They've laughed in the face of death, dismemberment, and the enemies of the United States. When they created the organization, they created it with the intent of giving American military members and veterans the opportunity to connect, using humor and camaraderie and supporting each other. Listen as Michael explains in more detail what they do, as well as his personal take on some of the tough obstacles Irreverent Warriors combat. Thank you, Mike, for being on America Daily.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're an organizer for Irreverent Warriors. Can you tell us what Irreverent Warriors is about, what their mission is?
So it seems like a bit of a cliche, but we've done a really great job of defining what our mission is with our mission statement. So instead of trying to come up with other words, I'll just use the ones that we use all the time because they're pretty powerful and we're pretty fond of them. The mission of Irreverent Warriors is to bring veterans together using humor and camaraderie to improve mental health and prevent veteran suicide. That's the mission. Get people out of their homes. Work on eliminating or at least lessening the feeling of isolation. The whole purpose of this is to, for a day, for an afternoon, whether we're talking about a hike or some of the other events that we do, we want to recreate the feeling of belonging that we all had in the squad bay or the barracks or sitting in a tent in some far off, dusty, crappy place on earth that we actually signed up to go to. You know, the day that you get out of the military is great. You're so happy and you walk out or you drive out that front gate and you look at your DD-214 and you're like, now what? Because 5 minutes ago, you had a family. 5 minutes ago, you understood what your purpose was in the society that you had chosen to join. You know, what you needed to do to be a successful member of that community, what you needed to do to excel, and whether or not you liked the people that you lived and worked with. You would fight, you would bleed, you would kill, and you would die for them. And they would do the same for you, even if you wouldn't piss on the dude if he was burning. Metaphorically, of course. And you walk out that front gate the day you get your DD-214 and everything is different. So we, at Irreverent Warriors, we want to bring people together, all with the only common denominator being that shared experience of service. We've all stood up somewhere in a military entrance processing station at a MEPS, raised our right hand and sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. Veteran, active duty, guard, or reserve. We want to bring those people together, create in this, depending on your perspective on things, this may be a negative term. We want to create some form of a safe space, give people opportunities to let their guard down, and either create or recreate the types of bonds they had with their brothers and their sisters when they were serving. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. And in regards to safe spaces, I think, we can definitely give a pass to veterans who have experienced really, really strong experiences that an everyday person could never fathom.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because there's I was a non-infantryman in an infantry unit. I was so in the more common vernacular in the Marine Corps, I was a pogue in a grunt unit.
Okay.
And yeah, I saw combat. I was in Fallujah in '04. I was in Ramadi in '05. And just for the sake of record keeping, I was the nuclear biological chemical defense specialist. It's MOS code 5711 for 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And I'll argue with anybody, any of your listeners, anybody out there in podcast land. We've got the coolest motto out of any unit in the military, especially for a grunt unit.
What's that?
Make peace or die.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's what the Marine infantry does. We blow shit up and we kill people. That's its purpose, as an instrument of political will. And I chose that. I was asked when I was in NBC school, what kind of a unit do you want to go to? Gunny or Master Sergeant? I want to go to a West Coast Victory unit. I want an infantry unit, and I want to be in California. And he made it happen. I got the experience that I was looking for. But to respond to your comment, everybody's different. Yeah, I went to combat in an infantry unit, but I'm not going to look down on somebody that never deployed, or somebody that did deploy and they spent all their time on an air base. They were a FOBIT or whatever. That who am I to say that their service is any less valid than mine? You don't have to necessarily have been in combat or gotten shot at or gotten shot or gotten blown up or been in an IED attack or gotten mortared. You don't have to have those things happen to you.
No,
come out of the service a little wired a little bit different.
Oh, no, of course not. I mean, I think even combat training is intensive. It's just something that civilian people don't go through. And the whole entire service is set up that it's training you to kill, and it's training you to think in a certain way, and it's training you to be a warrior. And not everybody gets to be a warrior in a daily life. So I definitely agree with you on that.
And I think that's something that's a little bit different for the Marines versus the other services, where before we are a Marine, you are a rifleman. Now, please don't interpret that as me, talking down to the other services. That's just that is a fundamental difference of Marine Corps culture. Before you learn your job, you're taught to kill. And that is, like you said, that is a fundamental difference of the military in general over the everyday, civilian walking around. And one could make an argument that that's a good thing. If again, somewhat of a cliche, you want me on that wall, you need me on that wall, or from what was that, A Few Good Men, or the quote that's always misattributed to George Orwell: we sleep soundly in our beds because rough men stand willing to do violence on our behalf against those that would do us harm.
Yes.
Many of us choose to be on that wall. We want to be those rough men and women. That's something that's important to so many of us.
It sure is. The federal government and many veterans groups talk about 22 a day. Can you explain what that saying means and why it's so important for family and friends of veterans to know the meaning behind it?
So my understanding of 22 a day is that all veterans, not just necessarily post 9/11 folks like myself, but veterans of all generations and of all conflicts, that 22 veterans a day make a permanent decision to solve a temporary problem. And it's important that people know that that's a thing, because, maybe Uncle Jimmy has more going on than he might let on. Maybe he's a little stoic when it comes to his experiences in his service. But it's important for the family to try to get their person talk about it. But maybe they're not okay with sharing that with their family. Maybe they think their family will look down on them because of what they did, or feel differently because of what they did when they were in the service. Maybe I'd go one step further and say encourage them to seek out something like Irreverent Warriors or Red, White, and Blue or Team Rubicon or any of the more traditional VSOs like the Legion or the VFW or something like that. Encourage your veteran to go out and introduce themselves to other people that will understand them, that have been where they've been. It all goes back to isolation. They don't feel, or we sometimes don't feel, that those around us either do understand us or could even understand us. And that can be terrifying for a lot of people.
Sure. I have an uncle, my mother's brother, who served 2.5 tours in Vietnam while he was in the Army. And I can't say if he was suicidal or not, yet I think I saw him struggle with PTSD. But back then it was called shell shock or combat stress fatigue. And he served 2.5 tours. I believe he didn't finish the 3rd tour because they sent him home. He was willing to keep fighting, but they felt it was best for his health. He was first a radio operator, and then towards the end, he was a tank man. Looking back, I realized our family had no real idea as to what he experienced in the war. He didn't talk about it. Like you say, they don't share those things. He didn't talk about it much except with his younger brother. My uncle, who was also in the Army during the Vietnam War, but he was stationed in Germany. They both joined the military knowing they would probably go to war, and they both felt it was their duty as American men, even in their late teens, to protect our country. So when you say that, I completely understand. I come from a family where it was just, it was natural for them. Now that I'm much older, I see that we weren't as supportive, as a family as they needed us to be when they returned, because we were just clueless. And I was also married to a Marine. I was married to him for 22 years, and he suffered through PTSD. And only after many years of seeing the patterns of depression, dark thoughts, sleep problems, and his difficulty in transitioning to civilian life, which really took a long time to finally understand, I didn't even know what to learn about to help him. So it was only a few years ago he got a diagnosis, and then it was like, oh, that's what's wrong with him. What advice do you give family and friends of veterans who have PTSD and are having trouble transitioning back to civilian life?
Well, we'll start with the obvious one, and probably the greatest pain in the rear end is make sure you at least, and I probably need to take my own advice because I've still yet to do that now, and I'm in the Marine Corps since 2006. Go to the VA and get evaluated and get your disability rating if you rate one, because for as much crap as we talk about the VA, I hope my experience is I've got a limited experience with the VA myself personally, but it's not all bad all the time. It could be kind of bad most of the time or a little bad all of the time, but it can't be all bad all the time. And I would say at least start there. Get your disability rating, get your PTSD analysis. Go through that process. Check the box. Make sure that you've done that, or at least started that, from what I'm told, arcane and long process. When it comes to transitioning back to civilian life, oh boy. Try to maintain as many of those friendships that you made when you were wearing the uniform, so that you can have people to talk to, not just folks with a different shared experience, but your shared experience, your squad mates, the same dudes that you're in a platoon with, like other guys in your company. I mean, Facebook is a pretty awesome thing where, back in the day, you'd have to take an ad out in Leatherneck magazine and hope that 20 guys from your reinforced infantry battalion of 1,100 men, 20 guys showed up to a reunion or whatever. Now it's a whole heck of a lot easier to find the people that you walked over dirt with and fought and bled with. Try to find veterans hiring fairs, companies that are going out of their way to bring veterans in, whether you have the training or not. Just go to those job fairs, because in a lot of cases there are many companies out there that want to hire veterans. And yeah, a lot of the positions may be entry level, but they're going to train you. And if military veterans or anything, we've proven that we're all malleable. We are all trainable. We can absorb skills and information and knowledge, because that's what we had to do. That was an absolute requirement of being a productive member of the society. You got training, and then you're able to apply it. Try to get a job where you're boss, or you can be on a team with other veterans, because they're gonna get you more, and that alone is gonna make life a little bit easier. And another suggestion that has nothing to do with work or your professional life: don't get fat. Don't put on the DD 214 version of the freshman 15. Like, whatever you do, don't do that. I talk to a lot of veterans, and a lot of us don't like running anymore because we don't have to, because we were forced to. I'm a big guy. I was never good at running, but I did it and I got good at it. I don't like to run now, but I got out of the Marine Corps, and within a couple of years, I was north of 270 pounds. I think the most I ever weighed was nearly 300 pounds. I got that all the way down to 200 about 2 years ago. But that right there has a huge impact on mental well-being and mental health. Your mental image. Maintain some level of physical fitness. I'm not saying you have to stay exactly within Marine Corps or your service height and weight standards, but whatever you do, don't become a soup sandwich. Don't become a fat body, because that, over almost anything else, is going to have a very, very negative impact on your mental health, because the image you see in the mirror doesn't match the image you see in your mind's eye anymore. You don't look 10 feet tall and bulletproof and able to hump a mortar base plate, 20 miles uphill both ways backwards in the snow or whatever. So don't get fat, and try to leverage your military experience and your veteran status into employment in any way that you can. And the more veterans you are fortunate enough to be surrounded by, more than likely, the better off you will be.
And I understand the meaning behind needing to be connected to a community. Like, as soon as they leave, they need to reach out to other veterans. Some veterans isolate themselves, and they're hard to bring out. Do you have any success stories about someone who is really hard to reach, but through camaraderie, community, and laughs, the mission of the Irreverent Warriors, they made a huge turnaround?
So my friend Jeremy is probably one of those people. He went to he was another one of the organizers for the Irreverent Warriors Raleigh hike. And if you listen to the 21 Gun podcast, which is the official podcast of Irreverent Warriors, by the way, he and I were on last week's episode, and he tells this really great story about coming full circle, where he came to the Raleigh hike, and the first one back in like 2016, and he was suicidal, he was isolated, was feeling down and disconnected. And another one of our friends, Gina or JC, gave him a coin and said, like, I forget exactly what the words were, but like, I'm here for you. I'm with you. And he started going on hikes, and he got connected to other people, and he came out of his shell, and he led the hike here in 2019, which was the next year that we put one on here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I get texts and Facebook messages all the time, and we see these posts on all the different boards for all the different cities that we've had events where people are like, "This was awesome. Thank you for doing this. I'm so glad I came out. I'm so glad my friend dragged me to this. I really needed this." What we say as part of the safety brief at a lot of the hikes is there's always someone, at least one someone, probably a couple someones, maybe many someones standing in this crowd right now that absolutely needs this. The answer to your question is yes. I could make an argument that every hike is a success story in and of itself. Like every single person that comes out. The more that I think about the way you asked that question, I'd make an argument that every attendee at every hike is in some small way, some maybe in a much bigger way.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah, it does make sense. Everyone is a success story. I've had friends who've had those dark thoughts too. A lot of times I just, my suggestion for them is just to endure because, we all go through hard times and some people experience it much more differently. And there are reasons for that. Good reasons, I believe. But that endurance, I think if maybe they can change their thinking and to not putting themselves down so much for experiencing it in a different way than other people. And definitely, that camaraderie is important. Community, always.
Yeah, having the community around you is that's the thing. It's for a day you're surrounded by family. That might not be the same family that you had, but the same goofballs and jokesters and skate artists and goody two shoes and PT studs and you look around long enough
Yeah.
at an IW hike and you're going to see all the same people that you used to serve with. Not those exact people, but people just like. I love those events because more often than not, I'm the only veteran. But at a hike, I'm one of many veterans, and I still might be one of the more extreme people in a room, but I'm probably not the most. And that's that's because you have to be veteran, active duty, guard, or reserve to hike. We'll probably end this sort of where we started this conversation, because it is a safe space, because there are people there that will understand where you've been and what you've done and how that felt and why you did it and why you had to do it. Afghanistan as a conflict is now old enough to drive, to vote, perhaps. Yeah. Afghanistan's gone on for 18 years. So you can be in your late 30s or 40s and meet an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, 22-year-old kid at one of these events, and you stood the same post at the same fob in Afghanistan nearly 20 years apart, maybe. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it sure is.
It's important that people understand that this isn't just like a once a year kind of a thing. Exchange phone numbers and become friends on Facebook, and get on our get in the IW groups on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and get connected into the community. And if you're not seeing stuff in your city or around where you're at, I know how we all feel about volunteering for shit, but put your hand in the air, reach out, Plan something. Get folks together at a bar. It doesn't even have to be like an official IW thing. Invite a bunch of your buddies out to a movie or have a barbecue. It doesn't have to be IW branded. It doesn't have to be official.
Sure, it almost sounds like it's just returning to traditions, things that regular Americans used to do all the time. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on our show.
You bet. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Me. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you. A big thank you to Mike Boscia and the Irreverent Warriors organization. Visit irreverentwarriors.com for information on their upcoming events. Join us this week as we tackle topics such as the American sexual revolution, the normalization of pedophilia and sex ed, problems pornography has created, and how the sexual revolution has communist origins. Once again, I'm Vanessa Rios Gomez. Thanks for listening.
This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.